Today's guest is Sherry Harbaugh. She's a specifications consultant and educator. Sherry, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking me. This is great. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and you're a specifications expert, so there's a ton of things I want to learn about that, so I'm excited as well.
Good.
So you've been part of this a long time, and how did it start for you? I mean, was this the original plan?
No, so I went to the School of Architecture, Montana State, and graduated from School of Architecture, moved to Sacramento because at the time you were able to start taking your architectural registration exam right out of school. In most states, you needed to wait for 3 years. So a bunch of us, Sacramento was a hot spot for construction at the time. So a bunch of us went down to Sacramento and we started taking our exam right away. And so when our 3-year internship was up, then we were able to sit for the oral exam. California has an oral exam. So we did that, sat for that. And then I worked for another couple of years in my internship, or, getting the breadth of what architecture was all about. It really wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Well,
So,
what did you think it was, and what was it actually?
well, I thought that, coming out of school, we were just so design focused. I thought we were just going to be designers and, working our way up to become, the next big thing and solving world problems with our great designs. But, after a couple of years of doing, toilet room elevations and reflective ceiling plans, I was like, you know what, this just isn't for me. I just, I just needed to find something else. And I actually did have a couple projects. I moved firms 3 times in that 5 years. My second job, I was able to do some design, even got to do some construction administration. And that's kind of where it all started to come together. Is we had hired an outside consultant to write the specifications for my project. And as the architect in charge of the project, I failed to review the specifications that person wrote. So when we got into construction, it was very eye-opening to see the contractor was asking me questions about, well, but the specification says this and the drawings say this. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. So there was a lot of conflicts between the drawings and the specs. So that was super eye-opening for me. So that when I figured out I was not cut out to be, the traditional designer or architect, I had to do a little bit of soul searching to find out, well, what is it that I really do enjoy doing? And, it came back to that project where I was manipulating the specs and the drawings and trying to figure out what had to happen, what were the right answers that the contractor needed, and how could I facilitate that?
Yeah.
And, I really admired the spec writer. I admired their knowledge. And I decided, you know what? I want to be that resource. I want to help firms navigate those specifications so that when they get in the field, they can, they're more accurate, they're more reflective of what the project is. So really, I started out with the intent of helping small firms excel at that coordination between the drawings and the specs.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess when you bring in an outside specifier,
Mhm.
do these I had the understanding that these architectural firms sometimes had this expertise in-house. How do you decide if you're bringing someone in or using internal expertise?
Well, not all firms have internal. So that was kind of the key. Like, well, how? Because I was working for a small firm at the time. I think we had maybe 5 or 6 people on staff, and so we were kind of all in charge of writing our own specs. And I was young enough, right out of school, I didn't know anything about, where do you even start? How do you start a specification for this project? And so the owner had relied on this other person to write specifications. So many firms don't have them. Many projects aren't required to have them. Um, and then there's the large firms that do have them on staff. And some of them have pools of architects or specifiers on, staff where they have, 5 or 6 people that are all just digging in and doing product research for the architects and pulling the specifications together and doing CA work. And it's, this intense pool of people. But the small firms don't have that.
Mm,
So I wanted to be that resource for the firms who didn't have a pool of specifiers, to help them have that same advantage.
yeah. So one question that popped into my head was, you said that some projects don't need specifications. What's the
Right.
threshold?
I think it's more. I would say it's more these days the um, project delivery method. If you have your contractor on board with you when you're starting, say it's a design build, I'm seeing where your design build specifications are very thin compared to a design bid build, where you're trying to detail everything out and get a competitive bid. And I think I'm trying to think of a project where they were like, oh, we don't need specs, but I'm even seeing residential specs now, sheet specs, on the front 1 or 2 pages of the drawings. We'll have a page that has proprietarily saying, these are the windows, these are the shingles we want. So I think in some one form or another, all the projects actually do have specifications. They're just not in a, 2-inch binder printed out for the contractor.
Yeah, absolutely. And when someone is navigating, whether it's an architectural firm or it sounds like on the owner's side, how do you properly vet your specification partner?
Your specification partner.
Yeah, like someone's doing the specification. I mean, not all specifiers are built the same. How do
Oh,
you understand if you're working with someone that knows what they're doing?
well, I'm not sure how you would vet them. Probably just interviewing and making sure the personalities, like any consultant, I suppose, where you would talk to a couple consultants and you would get to know them and see if you're compatible with them personality wise and schedule wise. Are we all on the same page here when we're dedicated to the project? I think being able to be part of the team is really important. To feel like you're the part of the team, that you're not just the spec writer, but you're actually a specifier that's contributing your knowledge and your talents and your skills towards a successful project.
Yeah. And the what is the scope of the consulting and the educating that you do?
So what I've started doing is all kind of a realm of specifications, because specifications affect everybody. They affect the entire team. So I'm tailoring my education towards whoever wants it, right? So if an owner says, I just need to be more savvy about materials, how do I communicate with my architect? Maybe the manufacturer's reps are saying, we need help onboarding our new employees so that they understand what division our products are in, how to sell to architects, what's a good time to approach an architect, to talk to them about, is it design development or construction development, CDs. When do we talk to an architect? Um, Teaching or helping the project managers and the architectural firms understand that specifications are important. So we want to get them started at the same time as the drawings, and kind of how they can manage the drawings and the specifications. As a project manager on a large project, or even a small or medium sized project, you need specifications. I'm working with someone right now that is working on an amphitheater, and they're at 50% design development, and they've already got their specifications going, and I'm so proud of them for taking this on. And I'm just trying to help encourage them along, and just being there for any advice. So not necessarily teaching and training, but just support staff.
Got it.
And
You
then
kind
there's
of have
also the
a holistic
document. I'm
approach.
sorry, go ahead.
You kind of have a holistic approach to kind of the whole process.
Hmm. Right, right. And I'm also working with some document coordinators. So in offices, there's usually like an administrative assistant that has to assemble all these things. We're getting documents from all the consultants, the owners got some bidding requirements coming in, the contractors got their own submittal forms. So helping the administrative assistants understand that you can expect all of these pieces of information to be coming into you, and this is how you assemble them. And this is what a table of contents looks like, and this is how you know, navigate that and change the footers and all that stuff. So just kind of holistically, whatever the person needs to get that job done successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about helping owners stay on top or learn about new materials. What generally do you suggest? Because new materials are coming out all the time.
Oh
What,
yeah.
what sort of practices do you advocate for these owners?
Well, for owners, they really need, I think the owners rely on their architect, right? The design team, design build, architect, the contractors, whoever's helping them put the project together. I think materials are advancing so quickly right now. It's really amazing how technical you can get with your materials, and you can say, "Yeah, I just want a metal roof," but there's so much that goes into it, right? There's so many decisions that need to be made. So it just really needs to be a material by material discussion with the aesthetics and what's the end result that you're looking for, what's the purpose of the building, how long do you want it to last. You can build a building that's going to be turned over in 10 years or 20 years, or you can do a 100-year building. Just depends on the quality of the materials that you're looking for.
Yeah. So what it sounds like, it's just a sort of a very detailed conversation with a lot of curiosities around, and being very specific about what your objectives are.
Definitely. Yes, lining out your expectations so
Yeah.
that everybody's on the same page with what the end result is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned earlier that, it's just more and more common to see more of these specifications or, not, fairly simple, but, sort of descriptions of projects. Um, what other trends or things have been changing in your space?
Gosh, I think one of the things that has changed over the last, I don't know, 20 years, let's say 20 years, besides technology, just in general, technology of materials and how we produce specifications and software systems. I think the other thing, we really rely on manufacturers' representatives. I think they are the knowledge holders, right? So when a question comes up, if I don't have the answer, I'm going right to a product material manufacturer for the answer. And I am not afraid to pick up the phone and ask. And I know, so in 20 years ago, it was this fear that if you talk to a product manufacturer, you're going to get sold a product. And so I think that stigma still exists. It's harder and harder for manufacturers to get the literature in the right hands of the decision makers. They're cut off at the door. They stop to update the library, whatever that is these days, right? Or talk to somebody, and they're like, "No, you can't talk to anybody. That person's not in. I'll deliver a message or whatever." Cold calls. Remember the old cold calls? I think that's over. I think people are just, red flag, put their hands up, not gonna talk to you. And so it's making it very difficult for manufacturers to get material in the hands of the people, the decision makers. And that's unfortunate. But I do think that manufacturers are really critical to the success of our projects right now because of the fast pace of technology changing, and how they might have 3 or 4 different systems that can solve your problem. But if we don't listen to them and let them tell us about them, we don't know.
Yeah. So what can manufacturers do to make it easier for them to be a resource or interface with these firms that need this information?
I think our independent specifiers and getting in touch with the specifiers are great. I also encourage them to um, understand that the decision makers are not the principals of the firms. they're the up and coming professionals, right? It's the people right out of school. And I remember in quite a long time ago when I used to have, sit in on lunch and learns, and the manufacturer would be like, I want the principal in the room. And I'd be like, oh, okay, you want the principal in the room. And now I'm thinking, why do you want the principal in the room? The principal's not making a decision. The longer I worked in the field, I was like, why would you want them in the room? They're just signing contracts. They don't have anything to do with your product. So I think that's a kind of a mental switch too, is you have to be aware that your decision makers aren't necessarily the people who sign the paychecks. They're the people who are, digging in and drawing details and trying to figure out how this is going to go together. Those are the people that you really want to target.
Now, how do you see future changes going, or what changes do you want to see going?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question. I'm not sure where we're going. We've seen so many great advances in software, specification software, as opposed to the old cutting and pasting, literally taping down words and then making a photocopy of things. We've got great software now that can help you make your decisions. You can do research right within the application. I think it's just going to get better. I toy with the idea of it connecting with Revit, being able to talk with the building information management systems. I've talked to enough people. I don't know that that's in our near future, but definitely on the verge of making that happen. But I don't know that any type of resources like that are going to replace specifiers. That personal touch of options and contact with other people and being aware of other products that can solve a problem. I know there's a lot of talk about AI out there right now. So that's why I'm going to tread lightly on the answer to that question. I don't think that AI is going to change specifiers. We may do research differently. Certainly, I can see I was challenged to do a little research on something recently, and I was like, okay, that's exactly what I would have specified. You're on. So that was good to see. But, how do you get to that question? How do you know to ask that question of the software to get that answer? So I think there's still going to be some human interaction.
Yeah, some sort of augmented approach, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Perfect. Is there any other best practices or things that you advocate for, routinely?
Oh, I like to encourage going back to how I started. I like to encourage the young architects that are trying to design the world and solve world problems with their magnificent designs, like I was not able to do, to really explore what your options are. There are so many careers, as you know, there's so many careers within the construction field that if you're keep finding that niche and always say yes and challenging yourself. I wouldn't have been ended up where I am if I hadn't done that and really kind of explored and thought back. So what do I really enjoy doing? So I think that you know to just don't take that attitude. Well, this is what I'm in. I'm stuck with drawing reflected ceiling plans for 40 years. You just really challenge yourself and looking at those other options.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Life is not linear, right?
Yeah, and to top that off, don't be afraid to pick up a spec and look at it, because that's just one of specifications is one of those things that people don't really want to touch. They're like, oh, specs, don't know what they are, don't want to deal with them, and they kind of move on, right? So it's that's one of the biggest challenges, to be well-rounded. I think is super important. And I also encourage people when I'm talking to them that the people who are more rounded are more likely to keep their job in a recession. And that's where you're You want that. You want to be on solid footing.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, Sherry, thank you. Thank you for sharing your expertise.
Well, thank you for having me here.